A Wanderer in the Spirit Lands by Arnaldo Farnese. Part 1. Days of Darkness. Chapter 1. My Death. I have been a wanderer through a distant country, in those lands that possess neither name nor place for you of earth, and I desire to record as succinctly as I can my wanderings, that those whose footsteps are directed toward that bourne may know what may, in their turn, await them. On earth and in my life of earth, I lived in the manner of those who seek solely the zenith of self-gratification. Though I was not unkind to some, and indeed was indulgent to those whom I loved, it was nevertheless with the constant feeling that they must, in return, minister to my gratification, that from them I might secure, through my gifts and my affection, the love and homage which was as my very life to me. I was talented, highly gifted both in intellect and person, and from my earliest years, the praise of others was constantly bestowed upon me, serving ever as my sweetest incense. No thought ever occurred to me of that entirely self-sacrificing love which can immerse itself so completely in the love for others that there remains no thought, no hope of happiness, save in securing the welfare of the beloved ones. Throughout my life, and among those women whom I loved, indeed among all who from time to time captivated my fancy, there was not one who ever appealed to my higher nature sufficiently to convince me that this was true love, the very ideal for which in secret I sighed. In each of them I found some cause for disappointment. They loved me as I loved them, neither more nor less. The passion I offered elicited only its counterpart from them, and thus I journeyed onward unsatisfied, yearning for I knew not what. Errors I made, ah, how numerous! Sins I committed, not a few. Yet the world was frequently at my feet, offering praise and calling me virtuous, noble, and gifted. I was feted, caressed, the pampered darling of fashionable society. I had but to woo to conquer, and when I succeeded, all turned to bitter ashes in my mouth. And then there ensued a period upon which I shall not dwell, when I made the most fatal error of all and ruined 2 lives where previously I had wrecked but one. It was no golden, floral wreath of roses that I wore, but a bitter chain, fetters as of iron that galled and bruised me until, at last, I broke them asunder and walked forth free. Free? Alas! Never again should I be free, for never for a single moment can our past errors and transgressions cease to dog our footsteps and impede our wings while we live, aye, and even after the life of the body is ended, until we have atoned for them one by one, and thus effaced them from our past. And it was then, when I deemed myself secure from all love, when I believed I had learned all that love could teach and knew all that womanhood had to offer, that I met one woman. Ah, how shall I designate her? She was more than mortal woman in my eyes, and I named her the good angel of my life. From the first moment of our acquaintance, I prostrated myself at her feet and offered her the entirety of my soul's devotion, the love of my higher self, an affection that was poor and selfish when compared to what it ought to have been, yet it was all I had to bestow, and I surrendered it completely. For the first time in my existence, I considered another more than myself, and though I could not ascend to the pure thoughts and bright imaginings that filled her soul, I thank God I never yielded to the temptation to drag her down to my level. As time progressed, I basked in her sweet presence, growing in those holy thoughts that I had deemed lost to me forever. I dreamt sweet dreams in which I was liberated from those shackles of my past that held me so cruelly, so relentlessly, now when I aspired to better things. And from my dreams I constantly awoke to the apprehension that another might win her from me, and to the knowledge that I, alas, possessed no right to utter a single word to hold her back. Alas, the bitterness and the suffering of those days. I knew that I alone had erected that wall between us. I felt that I was unfit to touch her, sullied as I was by the ways of the world. How could I dare to take that innocent, pure life and link it to my own? At times, hope would whisper that it might be so, but reason answered ever no. And though she was so kind, so tender toward me that I discerned the innocent secret of her love, I knew, I felt, that on earth she never would be mine. Her purity and her truth raised between us a barrier I could never transcend. I attempted to leave her. In vain. As a magnet is drawn to the pole, so was I constantly drawn back to her, until at last I struggled no more. I strove only to enjoy the happiness that her presence afforded, grateful that at least the pleasure and the sunshine of her presence were not denied me. And then there arrived for me a dreadful and unexpected day, when, with no warning, no sign to awaken me to my position, I was suddenly snatched from life and plunged into that abyss, that somatic death which awaits us all. And I knew not that I had expired. I passed from several hours of suffering and agony into sleep, a profound, dreamless slumber, and when I awoke, it was to find myself solitary and in total darkness. I could rise, I could move. Surely I was better. But where was I? Why this darkness? Why was no light left with me? I arose and groped as one does in an unlit room, but I could find no light, hear no sound. There was nothing but the stillness, the darkness of death around me. Then I resolved to walk forward and find the door. I could move, though slowly and feebly, and I groped forward. For how long I know not. It seemed to be hours, for in my mounting horror and dismay, I felt I must find someone, some way out of this place. And to my despair, I seemed never to encounter any door, any wall, anything. All seemed void and darkness around me. Overcome at last, I cried aloud, I shrieked, and no voice answered me. Then repeatedly I called, and still the silence persisted. No echo, even of my own voice, returned to comfort me. I thought of her whom I loved, but something caused me to shrink from uttering her name there. Then I thought of all the companions I had known, and I called upon them, but none answered me. Was I in prison? No. A prison has walls, and this place possessed none. Was I mad? Delirious? What? I could feel myself, my body. It was the same. Surely the same? No. There was some change within me. I could not tell what, but I felt as though I were shrunken and deformed. My features, when I passed my hand over them, seemed larger, coarser, and surely distorted? Oh, for a light! Oh, for anything to tell me even the worst that could be told. Would no one come? Was I entirely alone? And she, my angel of light, oh, where was she? Before my sleep she had been with me. Where was she now? Something seemed to snap in my brain and in my throat, and I called wildly to her by name, to come to me, if only once more. I felt a terrible sense as if I had lost her, and I called and called to her wildly, and for the first time, my voice possessed a sound and rang back to me through that awful darkness. Before me, far, far away, there appeared a tiny speck of light like a star, which grew and grew, approaching nearer and nearer until at last it manifested before me as a large sphere of light, stellar in shape, and within the star I beheld my beloved. Her eyes were closed as of one in sleep, but her arms were held out to me, and her gentle voice said, in those tones I knew so well, "Oh, my love, where are you now? I cannot see you. I only hear your voice, I only hear you call to me, and my soul answers to yours." I tried to rush to her, but I could not. Some invisible force held me back, and around her seemed a ring I could not pass through. In an agony I sank to the ground, calling upon her to leave me no more. Then she seemed to lose consciousness. Her head sank upon her breast, and I saw her float away from me as though some strong arms had borne her. I sought to rise and follow her, but could not. It was as if a great chain held me fast, and after some fruitless struggles, I sank upon the ground in unconsciousness. Chapter 2. Despair. Dead, dead, I cried out in anguish. Oh no, surely not, for the deceased feel nothing further. They return to dust, they molder into decay, and all is lost to them, devoid as they are of any further consciousness, unless, indeed, my vaunted philosophy of life has been entirely erroneous, utterly false, and the soul of the departed survives even as the corporeal frame decays. The priesthood of my own church had instructed me in this doctrine, yet I had derided them as foolish, blind, and knavish charlatans. For their own selfish ends, they preached that mankind would live anew, gaining entrance to heaven only through a portal to which they held the keys that turned solely for gold and at the behest of those remunerated to offer masses for the departed soul. These ecclesiastics preyed upon credulous, frightened women and weak-minded men, who, capitulating to the terror inspired by horrific tales of hell and purgatory, surrendered themselves, body and soul, to purchase the illusory salvation thus promised. I would have no part of them. My acquaintance with these clerics and the concealed reality of their private lives was far too profound for me to heed their idle fables and empty assurances of an absolution they lacked the power to bestow. Consequently, I had resolved to confront death, when its hour arrived, with the fortitude of those who believe only in absolute extinction. For if these priests were mistaken, who indeed was correct? Who could reveal any truth concerning the hereafter, or indeed whether a Creator existed at all? Certainly not the living, who merely theorize and conjecture, nor the dead, from whom none have ever returned to speak. Yet now I stood beside this grave, my own grave, and heard my beloved pronounce me dead as she scattered flowers upon the mound. As I gazed, the solid earth grew transparent before my eyes, revealing the coffin beneath, inscribed with my own name and the date of my demise. And through the casket, I beheld the pallid, motionless form I recognized as myself lying within. To my horror, I perceived that this body had already begun to putrefy, becoming a loathsome object to behold. Its comeliness had vanished, its features rendered unrecognizable, whilst I stood there, fully conscious, gazing down upon it and then at myself. I felt each of my limbs, traced with my hands every familiar lineament of my countenance, and realized that although I was deceased, I nevertheless lived. If this indeed were death, then those priests must have been right after all. The dead survived, but whither? In what condition? Was this encompassing darkness hell itself? Surely, in their estimation, no other destination could have been reserved for me. So utterly lost was I, so far beyond the pale of their church, that they would not have deemed me eligible even for purgatory. I had severed all ties with their establishment. I had held it in such contempt, reasoning that an institution which was cognizant of, yet condoned, the ignominious and ambitious lives of its most revered dignitaries possessed no right to style itself a spiritual guide to mankind. Admittedly, there were virtuous men within the clergy, yet there also existed a vast multitude of shameless, unrighteous individuals whose profligacy was a matter of public notoriety and common derision. Nevertheless, the Church, which claimed to be the exemplar for all humanity and the sole custodian of truth, failed to excommunicate these men of disgraceful conduct. On the contrary, she elevated them to ever higher positions of honor. None who have resided in my native land and witnessed the egregious abuses of power within her Church will marvel that a nation should rebel and seek to throw off such a yoke. Those who recall the socio-political climate of Italy during the first half of this century, and the complicity of the Church of Rome in assisting the oppressor to rivet the fetters that bound her. Those who know how private life was honeycombed with informants, both clerical and lay, to the extent that a man feared to whisper his innermost sentiments to his nearest and dearest, lest she betray him to the priest, and he in turn to the state. How the dungeons groaned with wretched men, and, indeed, mere youths guilty of no transgression save a love for their homeland and a hatred of its oppressors. Those, I say, who are cognizant of these realities will not marvel at the fierce indignation and ardent passion that smoldered within the breasts of Italy's sons, finally erupting into a conflagration that consumed humanity's faith both in God and in his self-styled vicar on earth. Like a mountain torrent bursting its banks, it swept away all hope of immortality, insofar as such salvation was deemed obtainable only through submission to ecclesiastical decrees. Such, then, had been my attitude of rebellion and disdain toward the Church wherein I had been baptized, and that institution could harbor no place for me within her fold. If her anathemas possessed the power to consign a soul to perdition, then surely I must reside there. And yet, even as this thought occurred to me, I gazed once more upon my beloved, reflecting that she could never have descended into hell, even in search of me. She appeared entirely mortal, and if she knelt beside my grave, then surely I must still linger upon the earth. Did the deceased, then, never depart this world, but rather hover near the precincts of their mortal existences? With these and many akin reflections crowding my mind, I endeavored to draw closer to her whom I so dearly loved, yet found myself unable to do so. An invisible barrier appeared to encompass her, holding me at bay. I could navigate to either side of her at will, approaching or retreating, yet her person I could not touch. Futile were all my exertions. Thereupon I spoke, calling her by name. I declared that I was present, that I remained conscious and unchanged despite my demise. Yet she gave no indication of hearing, nor did she perceive me. She continued to weep in silent sorrow, tenderly caressing the blossoms and murmuring to herself that, since I had so loved flowers, I would surely discern that she had placed them there for me. Repeatedly I addressed her with all the strength of my voice, yet she heard me not. She remained oblivious to my words. She merely stirred uneasily, passing her hand over her brow like one immersed in a dream, and then slowly, mournfully, she departed. I strove with all my strength to follow her. In vain. I could recede but a few yards from the grave and my mortal remains, and then the reason became manifest. A bond resembling a dark silken thread, seemingly no thicker than a spider's web, tethered me to my physical form. No power of mine could sever it. As I moved, it stretched elastically, yet invariably drew me back. Most terrible of all, I now became conscious of the putrefaction of that decaying corpse encroaching upon my spirit, much as a poisoned limb inflicts suffering upon the entire earthly body, and a new horror assailed my soul. Then a voice, as of some majestic being, spoke to me in the gloom and said, "You cherished that physical form more than your soul. Observe it now as it dissolves into dust, and realize the nature of that which you worshipped, ministered unto, and clung to. Know how transient it was, how loathsome it has become, and gaze upon your spiritual body to see how you have starved, restricted, and neglected it for the transient pleasures of the mortal frame. Behold how impoverished, repulsive, and deformed your earthly existence has rendered your soul, which is immortal, divine, and destined to endure eternally." And I looked, and I beheld myself. As though a glass were held before me, I saw my own reflection. Oh, horror! It was indisputably myself, yet, alas! How dreadfully altered, how vile, how steeped in baseness did I appear. So repulsive was every feature, and even my stature was deformed. I recoiled in terror at my own aspect, praying that the earth might cleave open at my feet and conceal me from all eyes for evermore. Ah! Never again would I call upon my beloved, nor ever again desire that she should look upon me. It was far better that she should believe me dead and departed from her forever. Better that she should retain only the remembrance of me as I had been in mortal life, than ever discover how dreadful was the transformation, or how monstrous a thing my true self had become. Alas! Alas! My despair and anguish were absolute. I cried out wildly, striking myself and tearing at my hair in a frenzy of self-loathing, until my passion spent itself, and I sank once more into senseless oblivion. Once more I awoke, and once more it was the proximity of my beloved that aroused me. She had brought fresh flowers, and she murmured further gentle, tender reflections of me as she deposited them upon my grave. Yet I did not now endeavor to make her perceive me. Nay, I shrank back, seeking to conceal myself, and my heart hardened even toward her, and I said, "Rather let her weep for the one who has departed than learn that he still lives." Thus, I permitted her to go. Scarcely had she departed when I called out frantically, imploring her to return by any means, even to a full awareness of my dreadful plight, rather than abandon me in that place, never to behold her again. She did not hear my voice, yet she sensed my summons. In the distance, I beheld her pause and half turn, as though intending to retrace her steps, but she proceeded once more and left me behind. Twice, thrice she returned, and upon each occasion I experienced the same aversion to approaching her. Yet whenever she departed, I was seized by the same desperate yearning to recall her and retain her by my side. But I summoned her no more, for I knew that the deceased call in vain, and that the living hear them not. To the entire world I was dead, existing only to myself and to my terrible doom. Alas! Now I knew that death was neither an endless sleep nor a tranquil oblivion. Far better would it have been had such been the case. In my despair, I prayed that this absolute oblivion might be granted to me, yet even as I petitioned, I knew it could never be, for man possesses an immortal soul and, whether for good or ill, joy or sorrow, endures eternally. His earthly vessel decays and resolves to dust, but the spirit, which constitutes the true essence of man, knows neither decay nor oblivion. Daily, for I perceived the passage of days over me, My consciousness became increasingly alert, and I beheld with growing clarity the events of my life passing in a long procession before me. Indistinct at first, they gradually grew more vivid, and I bowed my head in helpless, hopeless anguish, realizing it must now be too late to undo a single deed. Chapter 3. Hope Wanderings Upon the Earth Plane, a Portal of Spiritual Vision. I know not how long this state persisted. To me it seemed an eternity. I sat still shrouded in my despair when I heard a voice, gentle and soft, calling to me, the voice of my beloved, and I felt constrained to rise and follow that summons until it should conduct me to her. As I arose, the cord that had so tightly bound me seemed to distend, stretching until I scarcely felt its constraint, and I was drawn forward until, at last, I found myself in a chamber which, even through the gloom that perpetually enveloped me, I could dimly recognize as familiar. It was the residence of my beloved, the very room where I had spent so many tranquil, happy hours in a past that now seemed separated from me by an immense and dreadful chasm. She was seated at a small table, a sheet of paper before her and a pencil in her hand. She repeatedly murmured my name, saying, "Dearest of friends, if the departed ever return, return to me, and endeavor to make me write a few words from you, even a mere yes or no in response to my questions." For the first time since my demise, I beheld a faint smile upon her lips and an expression of hope and expectation in those beloved eyes, which were otherwise so heavy with weeping for my sake. Her beloved countenance appeared so pale and sorrowful in her grief, and I felt, how intensely I felt, the sweetness of the love she had bestowed upon me, a love which I now dared less than ever to claim. Then I perceived 3 other forms near her. These I knew were spirits, yet how vastly different from myself. These entities were so bright and radiant that I could not bear to gaze upon them, the sight seeming to scorch my eyes as with fire. One was a man of tall, serene, and dignified bearing, who bent over her to protect her as though he were her guardian angel. Beside him stood 2 fair young men, whom I immediately recognized as the brothers of whom she had so frequently spoken to me. They had passed away when youth, with all its promises, lay before them, and their memories were enshrined in her heart as beings who had now become angels. I recoiled, sensing that they perceived me, and sought to conceal my disfigured face and form beneath the dark mantle I wore. Then my pride was aroused, and I said, "Has she not herself summoned me? I have come, and shall she not be the arbiter of my destiny? Is it so irrevocable that nothing I can do, no sorrow, no repentance however profound, no deeds however great, no labor however arduous, can reverse it? Is there indeed no hope beyond the grave?" And a voice, the very voice I had previously heard beside my own grave, answered me, "Son of grief, is there no hope on earth for those who transgress? Does not even man forgive the offender who has wronged him, if the sin be repented of and pardon sought? And shall God be less merciful, less just? Dost thou possess repentance even now? Examine thine own heart, and see whether it is for thyself or for those thou hast wronged that thou art sorrowful." And as he spoke, I knew that I did not truly repent. I merely suffered, loved, and longed. Then once more my beloved spoke, entreating me, if I were present and could hear her, to attempt to write a single word through her hand, that she might know I still lived and still thought of her. My heart seemed to rise into my throat, suffocating me. as I drew near to discover if I could move her hand, or even touch it. But the tall spirit intervened between us, and I was compelled to retreat. Then he spoke, saying, "Impart your words to me, and I shall cause her hand to transcribe them for you. This I will do for her sake, and because of the love she bears you." A great surge of joy swept over me at his words, and I would have taken and kissed his hand, yet I could not. My hand seemed scorched by his radiance before I could touch him, and I prostrated myself before him, believing him to be one of the angels. My beloved spoke once more, asking, "Are you here, dearest friend?" I answered, "Yes," and then I beheld the Spirit place his hand upon her. As he did so, her hand traced the word "yes." Slowly and unsteadily it moved, like that of a child learning to write. Ah, how she smiled! She then posed another question, and, as before, her own hand traced my response. She inquired whether there was anything she might do for me, or any wish of mine she could assist in fulfilling. I replied, "No, not now. I shall depart and torment her no more with my presence. I shall allow her to forget me now." My heart was so sore and bitter as I spoke. Yet, how sweet to me was her reply, and how deeply it touched my soul to hear her say, "Do not say that to me, for I would ever be your truest, dearest friend, as I was in the past, and since your death my sole thought has been to find you and to speak with you once more." And I answered, nay, I cried out to her, "It has been my only wish also." She then inquired if I would return, and I answered, "Yes, for where would I not have gone for her sake? What would I not have done?" Then the radiant spirit indicated that she must write no more that night. He caused her hand to write this also, and directed that she should retire to rest. I felt myself once more drawn away, back to my grave and my earthly vessel in that dark churchyard, yet not to the same hopeless sense of misery. Despite everything, a glimmer of hope had arisen in my heart, and I knew I should see and speak with her again. Yet now I discovered that I was not alone. Those two spirits, her brothers, had followed me and now spoke. I shall not relate all that they said. Suffice it to say that they pointed out the vastness of the chasm that now lay between their sister and myself, and inquired whether I desired to cast a shadow over her youth with my dark presence. Were I to leave her now, she would, in time, forget me, save as one who had been a beloved friend. She could always cherish my memory with tenderness, and surely, if my love for her were genuine, I would not wish to render her entire youth lonely and desolate for my sake. I replied that I loved her, and could never bear to depart from her, nor endure the thought of any other, loving her as I did. Then they spoke of my character and my past, and asked if I dared to think of linking myself with her pure life, even in the tenuous spectral fashion in which I still hope to do. How could I hope that, when she passed away, I should ever meet her? She belonged to a luminous sphere to which I could not hope to ascend for a vast duration. Would it not, therefore, be preferable for her, as well as nobler and more genuinely loving on my part, to allow her to forget me and to discover whatever happiness life might yet afford her, rather than to endeavor to sustain a love that could bring her naught but sorrow? I murmured faintly that I believed she loved me. To this they replied, "Yes, she loves you as she herself has idealized your image within her own mind, and as she, in her innocence, has depicted you. Do you believe that, were she cognizant of your entire history, she would still love you? Would she not recoil from you in horror? Disclose to her the truth. Grant her the liberty to be free from your presence. And you shall have acted a more noble part and demonstrated a truer affection than by deceiving her and attempting to bind her to a being such as yourself. If you truly love her, consider her well-being and that which will secure it, rather than focusing solely upon yourself. At that, the hope within me was extinguished, and I bowed my head to the dust in shame and agony. For I knew that I was vile and utterly unworthy of her, and I perceived, as though in a mirror, what her life might yet become if liberated from my influence. She might yet find happiness with another more worthy than I, whereas my love would serve only to drag her down into despondency alongside me. For the first time in my existence, I prioritized the happiness of another above my own, and because I loved her so deeply and desired her joy, I said to them, "Let it be so, then. Reveal to her the truth, and let her offer me but a single kind word of farewell, and I shall depart, darkening her life with the shadow of my own no longer." Thus we returned to her, and I beheld her sleeping, exhausted by her grief on my account. I entreated them to permit me a single kiss, the first and the last I should ever bestow. Yet they refused, deeming it impossible, for my touch would irrevocably sever the fragile thread that still bound her to existence. Then they awakened her and compelled her to transcribe their words, while I stood by, hearing each word fall like a nail into the coffin wherein they were interring my final hope forever. As though in a dream, she continued to write, until at last the entire ignominious history of my life was disclosed, leaving me only to declare to her myself that all was eternally ended between us, and that she was liberated from my sinful presence and my self-serving devotion. I bid her adieu. Like drops of blood wrung from my very heart were those words, and like ice they fell upon her own heart, crushing it. Thereupon I turned and departed from her. In what manner, I know not, but as I went, I felt the cord that had bound me to my grave and my earthly vessel snap, and I was free, free to wander wheresoever I wished, solitary in my desolation. And what followed? Ah me! Even as I pen these words, tears of gratitude well in my eyes once more, and I am nigh overcome with emotion in the attempting of it. For she whom we had deemed so frail and gentle that we presumed to decide her fate, recalled me with the irresistible force of a love that none dared oppose. She recalled me to her side. She declared that she could never relinquish me so long as I retained my love for her. Be your past what it may, and though you be sunken now even to the profoundest depths of perdition, I shall love you still. I shall still seek to follow you and claim my right, the right of my love, to aid, comfort, and cherish you until God, in His infinite mercy, shall have pardoned your transgressions and you are elevated once more. And it was then that I succumbed to my grief, weeping as only a strong, proud man can weep, whose heart has been wrung, bruised, and hardened, only to be softened by the tender touch of a loving hand until tears bring their necessary relief. I returned to my beloved and knelt beside her, and though they forbade my touching her, that serene, beautiful spirit who served as her guardian whispered to her that her prayer had been answered, and that she should indeed guide me back toward the light. Thus I departed from my darling, and as I faded from her presence, I beheld the form of a white angel hovering over her to bestow strength and solace upon her who was, herself, my angel of light. I left her in the care of those spirits and went forth to wander until her voice should summon me to her side once more. Following the brief, troubled slumber into which those luminous spirits had cast her, my darling awoke on the morrow and sought out a benevolent, worthy man whom she had discovered during her endeavors to find some means of reaching me beyond the grave. Hoping that the assertions regarding those known as spiritualists might contain some truth, she aspired through their intervention to converse with me again, and, prompted by her guardian watchers, she had sought out this individual, renowned as a healing medium, who informed her that, should she make the attempt, she might herself transcribe messages from the departed. This I did not learn until later. At the moment, I felt only that I was summoned by the voice of her whose influence over me was so profound, and in obedience to that call, I found myself standing within what I could but dimly perceive to be a small chamber. I say dimly, for all remained shrouded in darkness save where the radiance surrounding my beloved shone like a star, faintly illuminating her immediate vicinity. It was to this benevolent gentleman of whom I speak that she had repaired, and it was the sound of her voice addressing him that had drawn me thither. She was recounting to him the events of the preceding night, declaring the depth of her love for me, and how she would gladly sacrifice her entire existence if, by so doing, she might offer me comfort and assistance. And that man addressed her with such compassionate words that, from the depths of my soul, I thanked him then, and thank him still. He offered me profound hope. He observed to my beloved that the bonds of the physical body are dissolved at death, leaving me free to love her and her free to return that affection. He suggested that she herself, more effectively than any other, could aid in my elevation, for her devotion would provide solace and hope beyond measure, illuminating my path of penitent endeavor. Furthermore, she possessed the greatest right to bestow it. My love for her had been an entirely pure and genuine passion, while hers for me proved stronger than death itself, having triumphed over the mortal divide. He was exceedingly kind, this man, assisting me to speak with her and to explain much that I could not have articulated the night before, when my heart was so wounded and filled with pride. He aided me in explaining what extenuating circumstances might have existed in my past, though I acknowledged that nothing can truly absolve one's transgressions. He permitted me to assure her that, despite all the errors of my past, she had remained sacred to me, cherished with an affection I had bestowed upon no other. He comforted and fortified her with a benevolence for which I blessed him even more than for his assistance to myself. And when at last she departed, I accompanied her to her dwelling, the light of hope kindled in both our hearts. Upon our arrival, however, I discovered that a new obstacle had been erected by her two spiritual brothers and others to whom she was dear. An invisible barrier encircled her through which I could not penetrate, and though I might follow her steps, I could not draw nigh. Thereupon, I resolved to return to the benevolent gentleman to seek his assistance once more. My desire seemed to transport me, for I soon found myself back in his presence. He became instantly aware of my presence, and, remarkable though it may seem, I discovered that he could comprehend much, if not all, of what I communicated to him. He grasped the import of my meaning and imparted to me many things that I shall not record here, as they pertained solely to myself. He assured me that with patience all would eventually be well, and that although her relatives might construct their spiritual ramparts around my beloved, her own will would invariably draw me through them to her side. Nothing could exclude her love from me, for no barriers could restrain it. Should I now endeavor to learn the matters of the spirit and strive for my own advancement, the chasm dividing us would vanish. Consoled, I departed from him and wandered forth once more, whither I knew not. I was now beginning to be dimly aware of other entities, resembling myself, flitting about me in the gloom, though they were scarcely visible to my sight. So utterly desolated and solitary did I feel that my thoughts turned once more toward my grave, it being the sanctuary most familiar to me, and no sooner had the yearning possessed my mind than I found myself transported back to that very spot. The blossoms which my beloved had bestowed upon me were now withered. For 2 days she had not visited the site, as though, since our last communion, she had consigned to oblivion the corporeal form interred within the earth, a circumstance that pleased me, and one I would not have altered. It was indeed fitting that she should dismiss the mortal clay from her thoughts and contemplate only the living spirit. Yet, even these decayed petals bore testament to her devotion, and I endeavored to lift a single white rose to bear away with me. I discovered, however, that I was utterly powerless to raise it, or indeed to shift it in the slightest degree. My hand passed through its substance as though it were naught but the phantom reflection of a flower. I moved toward the head of the grave, where stood a monument of white marble in the form of a cross, and there I beheld inscribed the names of my beloved's 2 brothers. Thus, I understood the depth of the affection she had shown me. In her love, she had laid my earthly remains to rest beside those whom she had cherished above all others. My soul was so deeply moved by this realization that I wept once more, and my tears, falling like dew upon my heart, dissolved its lingering bitterness. Overwhelmed by loneliness, I finally arose and drifted away once more amidst the other somber, flitting shadows, few of whom deigned to cast a glance toward me. Perhaps, like myself, their perception was dimmed. Ere long, however, 3 shadowy figures, resembling 2 women and a man, passed in close proximity, then turned to follow in my wake. The man touched my arm and inquired, "Whither are you bound? Assuredly you have but recently arrived upon this shore, else you would not hasten so. None make haste here, for we are all well aware that eternity is ours to wander in." Thereupon, he uttered a laugh so chilling and discordant that a shudder passed through me. One of the women seized my arm on the right, and the other on the left, saying, "Accompany us, and we shall demonstrate how you may yet relish existence despite your demise. If we lack physical vessels through which to enjoy ourselves, we shall borrow them from mortals for a brief spell. Come with us, and we shall prove to you that pleasure has by no means reached its end." In my profound isolation, I welcomed the presence of any beings with whom I might converse, notwithstanding that all 3 possessed a most repulsive aspect, the women appearing to my estimation even more hideous than the man. I felt disposed to permit them to guide me and to observe what might transpire, and indeed had already turned to accompany them, when, far off in the gloomy distance, like an image traced in light upon a sable sky, I beheld the ethereal form of my pure and sweet beloved. Her eyes were closed, just as I had beheld them in my first vision. Yet, as before, her hands were outstretched toward me, and her voice fell upon my ears like a celestial harmony, saying, "Alas! Take heed, take heed! Accompany them not, for they are wicked, and their path leads only to perdition." Thereupon the vision vanished, and, like one awakening from a trance, I shook off the grasp of those 3 entities and fled once more into the darkness. How long or how far I wandered, I cannot tell. I hastened forward continuously to escape the memories that beset me, and it seemed as though the vastness of all space lay open to my aimless journeying. At length, I seated myself upon the ground to rest, for there appeared to be a surface sufficiently solid to support me, and as I sat there, I perceived a light glimmering through the surrounding gloom. Upon drawing closer, I observed a vast nebula of light radiating from a chamber within my view. Yet its brilliance was so intense that to gaze upon it pained my eyes, much as looking directly at the terrestrial noonday sun would have done. Unable to endure the brightness, I was on the verge of turning away when a voice spoke, "Tari, weary wanderer, here you shall find only benevolent hearts and succoring hands. If it is your desire to behold your beloved, enter, for she is present, and you may converse with her." I then felt a hand, though I could discern no visible form, gently draw my mantle over my head to shield me from the blinding glare, guide me into the chamber, and seat me in a capacious chair. I was so profoundly fatigued, so utterly spent, and so grateful for repose. Moreover, within this sanctuary there reigned such tranquility that it seemed I had somehow attained the gates of heaven. After a brief interval, I raised my eyes and beheld two gentle, benevolent women who appeared to me as angels, and I murmured to myself, "Surely I have drawn nigh to heaven?" Gazing once more and finding my vision now strengthened, I beheld beyond those two fair, virtuous women, and at first I could scarcely credit my senses, so overwhelming was my joy, my beloved herself, gazing toward me with a sad but tender smile. She smiled, yet I perceived she did not truly see me. However, one of the ladies clearly did, and in a low, hushed voice, she was describing my presence to my dearest one. My beloved appeared deeply gratified, for this testimony confirmed that which the man had previously imparted to her. She had been recounting to these ladies the remarkable experience she had undergone, and how it had seemed to her like some wondrous dream. I longed to cry out to her then that I was indeed present, that I still lived, still cherished her, and placed my trust in her enduring affection. Yet I was powerless to move, bound by some mysterious spell, restrained by an intangible force whose influence I could but dimly perceive. Then those two benevolent ladies spoke, and I realized they were not yet angels, for they still inhabited their earthly tabernacles, and she was able to perceive them and speak with them. They spoke at length of the deeds of that kind and virtuous man, and of the hope that remained for such sinners as myself. The very voice that had bidden me enter now inquired whether I would desire one of the ladies to transcribe a message on my behalf. I replied yes, 1,000 times yes. Thereupon, I uttered my words, and the Spirit compelled the lady to commit them to writing. I declared to my beloved that I still lived, and still loved her. I implored her never to forget me, nor ever to cease thinking of me, for I required the full measure of her love and support to sustain my existence. I remained unchanged toward her, though I was now weak and helpless, unable to make myself visible to her sight. And she returned such exquisite words of consolation that I cannot bring myself to record them. They are far too sacred, and shall dwell enshrined within my heart for all eternity. The interval that succeeded this interview was, for me, a period of profound slumber. So utterly exhausted was I that upon departing from that chamber, I wandered but a short distance before sinking to the earth in deep, dreamless oblivion. Of what import was the place of my repose, when all around me was shrouded in perpetual night? How long my sleep endured, I cannot tell. During that epoch, I possessed no means of measuring time save by the measure of suffering and misery through which I passed. I awoke from my slumbers somewhat refreshed, and with my senses noticeably heightened. I could move with greater celerity. My limbs felt stronger and more unburdened, and I became conscious of a desire for sustenance that I had not previously experienced. This craving intensified to such a degree that I went in search of nourishment. Yet for a considerable duration, I could discover none. At length, I found what appeared to be hard, dry bread, scant crusts only, yet I was grateful to consume them, whereupon my hunger was somewhat appeased. Here I must observe that spirits do indeed partake of the spiritual counterpart of mortal sustenance. They experience both hunger and thirst as acutely as mortals do on earth, though neither our food nor our drink would be any more visible to physical sight than are our spiritual forms, yet to us they possess an objective reality. Had I been a drunkard or a devotee of culinary pleasures during my earthly existence, I should have felt these physical cravings much sooner. As it was, my physical needs had ever been easily satisfied, and although I initially recoiled from those dry crusts in disgust, a brief reflection reminded me that I had no means of procuring anything better, and that, like a beggar, I had best content myself with a beggar's fare. My thoughts reverted once more to my beloved, and these reflections bore my spirit along with them, so that I found myself entering once again the chamber wherein I had last beheld her and the two ladies. On this occasion, I seemed to gain admittance immediately, and was received by two male spirits whom I could perceive but very dimly. A veil appeared to hang between us, through which I discerned those two spectral men, the ladies and my beloved. I was informed that I might once more convey a message to her through the lady who had previously transcribed my words. I was so eager to ascertain whether I could induce my beloved herself to write down my words, as I had observed her guardian spirit do, that permission was granted me to make the attempt. To my profound disappointment, I discovered that I was unable to accomplish this. She remained insensible to all my utterances, compelling me to abandon the endeavor and permit the lady to write on my behalf, as had previously been the custom. Once my message had been conveyed, I rested briefly, contemplating the exquisite countenance of my beloved, as had been my custom in happier days of yore. My reverie was interrupted by one of those spiritual beings, a grave and handsome young man, so far as my limited vision allowed me to discern. Addressing me in a serene and benevolent tone, he remarked that if I truly desired to transcribe my own words through my beloved herself, it would be advantageous for me to associate with a brotherhood of penitents who, like myself, sought to pursue a higher path. He assured me that in their company I should learn many truths of which I was yet ignorant, which would assist me in preparing to guide her mind, while also granting me the coveted privilege of occasionally attending her during her earthly sojourn. This path of repentance, he cautioned, was arduous, exceedingly arduous, the stages numerous, and the toil and suffering immense. Yet it led ultimately to a fair and blessed realm wherein I should find a degree of repose and felicity of which I could not presently conceive. He assured me that my misshapen form, which I remained so eager to conceal from the eyes of my beloved, would undergo a transformation corresponding to the elevation of my spirit, until I should once more possess an appearance so pleasing that her sight of me would no longer be a source of grief. Were I to remain upon the earthly plane in my current state, I would in all probability be drawn back to my former haunts of ostensible pleasure, and within that atmosphere of spiritual degradation, I would soon forfeit the capacity to remain near my beloved in any measure. For her own protection, her guardians would find themselves compelled to bar my presence. Conversely, should I align myself with this brotherhood, I would receive such aid, fortitude, and instruction that when, in due course, the time arrived for my return to the earthly plane, I would have acquired a strength and a spiritual armor capable of resisting its temptations. I listened to the utterances of this grave, courteous spirit with wonder and an increasing desire to learn more of the brotherhood he described, entreating him to conduct me to them. This he promised to do. First, do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.